Good morning. I been a good week. Hope for everybody else as well. Um, been a very cold one, chilly one, but we got through it. My dad, I was just laughing with a couple of people before the lesson, and my dad tends to enjoy his own voice, and so sometimes I end a bit late. And last night we were busy chatting, and he says he can't believe it because it's only starting at 11 o'clock. So you can imagine how long that church is going to be sitting together for today. But yeah, I just want to thank you again for the opportunity to preach. It's always nice to prepare something and always try to bring something that is relevant to everyone. Um, in preparation for this lesson, it's probably been something that, again, like many people know that work with me, it happened last night, and where I put things to paper. But it's been 4 weeks of thinking. It's been 4 weeks of trying to put something together that stays relevant, that is able to impact you, but also something that comes from the heart. Yesterday I was lucky to take the youth for one of their events, and so we were at the church here from about 3 o'clock yesterday, and I left just past about 9:05. Dropped off one of the youth at home, and my father phoned me and he says, "Listen, dude, I'm busy with my lesson. Don't you want to come and then we can sit and talk while we're busy doing our lesson?" So got home and sat at the table, and we were busy sitting and chatting. And have you ever had one of those moments where you're busy chatting about something, and because it's so relevant, because it's something so special, it actually makes whatever you're busy with so irrelevant. And so that's exactly what happened last night. Is that what I initially planned on speaking on this morning? Just from speaking with my dad and just getting to know what he's talking about, it changed my whole thing, my whole lesson. So he went to bed at about, I think it was about 12:30, and so I sat like Kippy till 2 o'clock this morning, trying to fall asleep and just can't. And so then, for those that say that God hasn't got a sense of humor, He does. This morning, I had the plan that I was going to wake up early. So 6 o'clock, my alarm goes on. I'm going to wake up. Man, I only went to bed at 2. So 6 o'clock, alarm went off. And eventually, like, it was 7:30. I think I need to wake up so I can finish off my lesson. So great, I should have enough time to finish off typing everything. And then God says, "I got another plan." And my phone rings. And it's an ex-employee of me. And I just thought to myself, ugh, I don't really want to answer now because I've got to get in the zone. And then I thought about myself, but it's my lesson, exactly what's happening now is what I'm going to be preaching on. So how hypocritical is that going to be that I don't pick up the phone and just see what the dude needs? So I pick up the phone and he says, "Man, I'm stuck in Durbanville. My bucky's not starting. Please, can you come and help?" And my immediate thought was just like, "JD is not available. Please leave a tone at the end of the message," and put down. But I just, everything in me said just get up and go and help. So although I've got notes, it's something that is very rough, to be deadly honest. But at the end of the day, it's actually what I like. I prefer that. Because if I think about how Jesus and his disciples would work, I can't imagine them sitting and writing notes every single night as they're preaching and teaching to people. It was from experience. It was from what was relevant to them right now, what was in their heart, and that is how they brought people to Christ. Think about it. Then the margin for error where things are performed as opposed to speaking from the heart and trying to connect with you is all done away with. But the past couple of weeks for me have been absolutely amazing. I think that for about a week before, or 3 weeks ago, it was probably one of the deepest and darkest points of my life where you feel like your world's coming apart and everything is so difficult, the world's against you, and you feel like you can't put your head above water. And it so happened that very weekend that everything was so disastrous, I was preaching the next day. Now, I cannot begin to tell you. If you think it's difficult to wake up when you're in that moment, try preaching when you're in that moment. When you feel like you can't pick your head off the pillow, but you've got to come and stand up here and try to encourage other people that might be going through difficulties at that moment in time. But I cannot tell you now, it was one of the biggest blessings that I could have done because you're speaking about what you're going through at that moment in time. And so the past couple of weeks have been very interesting. Just to tell you something that is so coincidental, people would say, I honestly see it as God's hand, is that very Sunday that I did the lesson, somebody came up to me and says, "Man, we need you. We need something from you." And I'm thinking, now it's like almost more energy that's coming from me, but you know what? Let's do it. And so I got asked to come and have a look at something, and the couple invite me for lunch. I mean, free food. Who's not going to accept that? So I go for lunch, and again, this is like one of the most deepest and darkest weeks of my life. Now I've got to like try to be encouraging and motivated and so forth, but I go there, and it's incredible to think that you step into the house of somebody that you know that loves you, and it seems like everything goes away. All the pain or whatever you're going through now, you know that they love you and that they want to be with you. And so that is honestly how you see the power of God, how he works in your life, how he carries you through things by giving in the moment that you are down in the dumps. I don't know if you've ever experienced that. And so I try to make sense of it this week. Obviously, as you get more energy, you start thinking to yourself, how is it possible that I'm able to, when I feel like I've got nothing in me, I'm able to give? And it goes down to psychology and goes down to the biology of how God has created us, where when you give, you get automatically something in your brain, oxytocin gets released. Oxytocin is that love hormone where you just feel accepted. Funny enough, what does the Bible say? It's more blessed to give than to receive. What do we do when we're in the dumps? It's all about me. People need to come to me. You know what? Oxytocin is released when you give. And that's the amazing thing about God. The past couple of weeks have been amazing, in actual fact. Because you know where it says that in the valleys is where the most nutrition and water is? I can speak from conviction that that is true. And so I start finding myself that my life has been changing slightly. I've been doing things like I started spending a little bit more time with my dad. Something that we haven't done in a very, very long time. I think I said last time that we've even made a knife together. I mean that, you know, he likes forging and this forge and fire thing, and I'm not going to do that. But we'll make a little knife together just so we got that alone time to spend together. And you start thinking, yes, but there's things that I haven't been doing that God says you should do. And you think, yes, I should have started doing this earlier. The funniest thing is that obviously coming out of the valley, now I feel so pumped and excited for life. You start looking around and you start saying, well, now that I know what it is to be in the valley, I'm able to see other people that are also there. And that's difficult. Have you ever been in the valley where you can see that you're hurting? And then it seems like the world's problems start coming onto your shoulders, where people say, I've got this problem, I've got that problem. You know, please can you speak to me in this regard, or please help me in that regard. You know what? I honestly believe that that is how God is trying to help you out of it. Where he says, I know that you are weak, but I know what is good for you and what's going to pick you up. Give back. Get up. Stop focusing on your own problems, because the more you focus on your problems, the more you're going to stay there. Get up and pick yourself up and dust yourself off. And so I started thinking to myself, well, how lonely is the world? So I did something that might be futile and not many people will find it interesting. But on Facebook at the moment, those who know Facebook, maybe you've heard of it, there are 600, well, this was in 2014, so it's probably doubled by now. But at that time, 2014, there were 640 million groups on Facebook. Not people, groups. And so you're finding 640 million groups, which let's say there's only 2 people in the group, but there's normally, you find up to 100 in one group, of people that are trying to find acceptance, people that are trying to find love and commonality within people. And so you start looking around and you start saying, there's so many lonely people that are just trying to find a group where they can be accepted for who they are and loved for who they are. And so it makes me start thinking a little bit like further than that. I start thinking, well, how is it possible that the church, which has got the source of love, which can affect people, that is able to grow people and so forth, how can we not be growing? Remember, we've got the source of life. We've got the source of life where if people need that comfort, love, forever and ever, amen, we're not getting more people into the doors. How is it possible? How is it possible that churches went through rapid growth and now seem to be plateauing? How is it possible that people are not finding comfort in God anymore? Sorry, is this thing on? Is it? Is it? Oh, okay, cool. How is it possible? And I start thinking to myself, we really need to start looking at our lives a little bit differently. I yesterday was very privileged to be part of something that I didn't donate at all. It was something that was part of somebody in our neighborhood. So I'll tell you the quick story. I was at my little cousin's birthday last weekend, and we're at Jump Around and so forth. And we went back to the house, and one of the boys that were there, his mother came and collected him. And at the moment that the mother arrived, my dad sent me a message saying that there's somebody in our neighborhood that's giving a jungle gym away. So I was thinking, cool, Dad, get it. I'll play on it later. But he said, do you know of anybody that might need it? And so, I mean, really, I don't. It's not really something that comes up in conversation very often. But I said to Peter, I said, man, do you know anybody that needs a jungle gym? And the lady in front of me said, I'll take it. So I just thought, okay, well, that's cool. There's a jungle gym. You can have it and so forth. So, and then she started saying, yeah, but my child's a little bit special. So I sort of thought, okay, well, a lot of kids are special. I see the youth every day, you know. But then she said, no, really, my kid is special. She's got something called Rett syndrome. I don't know if you know what Rett syndrome is. I didn't know what it was. And then my cousin actually told me what it was. And we sat and looked at it. And it's something that only affects women or girls for some reason. And it's a deficiency in the brain where they've got no, their motor neurons and nothing works. So what you've got right now, she's got a 9-year-old that cannot speak. She cannot walk properly. She cannot function as a normal human being. And so at that moment in time, you look at this jungle gym, an absolute blessing for somebody like that. So I phoned up the person and I said, it's a German guy. He does horse riding, or he coaches horse riding, whatever it is. And I said, we'll take it. I said, there's a girl that really, really needs it. And so I phoned the person and I said, look, 9 a.m. Saturday, which was yesterday. And so seeing this little girl not being able to walk, talk, or anything like that, look at a jungle gym that we see as something so stupid, coming up to me and hugging me, is a thank you that I can guarantee you nobody can ever give. Somebody who cannot give something like a proper hug is the best thank you I think I've ever gotten in my life. I couldn't sit there. I said, I'm sorry, I've got to go. I've got things to do today. A child that could never, with her words, say thank you, said thank you. And it starts putting so much into perspective. You start saying, well, how can I do more? If this is what I can do for a little girl like that, how can we do more and reach more people? You think about what it meant for that little girl that she can go on a little swing. She might not even be able to go down the slide, but she appreciated it so much. So many times we look at people that seem to be less than us, and we lose so much perspective in life. Please turn with me to John chapter 4. John chapter 4 is something that my dad and I were speaking about last night. It wasn't a verse that I was planning on going to this morning because it seemed like it was not relevant to what I was talking about. But John chapter 4 speaks about the Samaritan woman at the well. And for those that obviously know the history, Samaritans and Jews did not mix in those days. And so you find Jesus we'll just read it. Sorry, John chapter 4, we're going to be reading from verses 1. It says, the Pharisees heard that Jesus was gaining and baptizing more disciples than John. Although, in fact, it was not Jesus who baptized, but his disciples. When the Lord learned of this, he left Judea and went back once more to Galilee. Now he had to go through Samaria. So he came to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near the plot of ground which Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there, and Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down by the well. It was about the 6th hour. When a Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, will you give me a drink? His disciples had gone to town to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, "You are a Jew and I'm a Samaritan woman. How can you ask me for a drink? For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." Jesus answered her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it was that asked you for a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." "Sir," the woman said, "you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where can you get this living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob, who gave us the well and drank from it himself, as did also his son and his flock and herds?" Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give him will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give him will become in him a spring of water welling up for eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water so that I won't get thirsty and have to keep coming here to draw water." He told her, "Go and call your husband and come back." "I have no husband," she replied. Jesus said to her, "You're right when you say you have no husband. The fact is that you have 5 husbands, and the man you now have is not your husband. What you have just said is quite true." "Sir," the woman said, "I can see that you're a prophet. Our father worshipped on the mountain, but you Jews claim that the place where we worship is in Jerusalem." Jesus declared, "Believe me, woman, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on the mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming, and has now come, when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshippers and the Father seek. God is spirit, and his worshippers must worship in spirit and in truth." The woman said, I know that Messiah, called Christ, is coming. When he comes, he will explain everything." Then Jesus declared, "I who speak to you am he." Just then Jesus' disciples returned and were surprised to find him talking to a woman. But no one asked, "What do you want?" or "Why do you talk to her?" Then, leaving her water jar, the woman went back to town and said to the people, "Come and see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Christ?" They came out of town and made their way towards him. I'm going to go back a little bit, or go back there now. If we look at this encounter, here's Jesus, who spent time with a woman that he wasn't supposed to associate with in those times. But Jesus saw it important to share with her what he's got. Somebody that in that time was not worthy of speaking to a Jew. Yet he sat there and ensured that he spoke to her and taught her. And this is the interesting thing. What comes next is a typical thing that we do. Typical. Let's see what the disciples do when we start reading from verse 31. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate that. From verse 31. Meanwhile, his disciples urged him, "Rabbi, eat something." But he said to them, "I have food to eat that you know nothing about." Then his disciples said to each other, "Could someone have brought him food?" "My food," said Jesus, "is to do the will of him who sent me and to finish his work." If we look at that response of Jesus, Jesus is not talking about actual food that he was putting in his mouth. He says he was getting filled just by doing what his Father told him to do, which was going to preach and teach to those that are lost. That is what quenched it for him. Jesus wasn't talking about food that we would say, but exactly there is exactly how us humans react. We say, first, chow, get yourself sorted out first. But Jesus says, no, I've got food that I'm getting here. His interest was in that person, not in himself at that moment in time. And that, for me, is true leadership of Christ. Where we start saying that we will eat last. Simon Sinek's written a book. I don't know if those have read it. I'm busy reading it at the moment. I'm 2 hours into it. And Simon Sinek says, leaders eat last. It's exactly that. You look at Christ here. says, I'll eat later. I've got food here that I've got for myself. I don't know if you've ever heard of a man called Nelson Mandela. Mandela is one of the most respected case studies in a lot of business circles. A lot of people look to his style of leadership and they're absolutely shocked and surprised and want to understand how Nelson Mandela was able to draw a nation together, and not only a nation, but worldwide. No matter what country you go into, he is respected for what he did. And a journalist once sat him down and said whatever he called him, Mandela, he said, how is it that you learned to be such a great leader? And he says, well, when I was younger, my father was a chief. And so what I would do is go with him to tribal meetings, and I'll go sit with all the elders. And so he says that there's two things that he learned from his father. The first thing that he learned from his father was that you sit in a circle. You sit in a circle so that you can see everybody's faces. And the second thing that he learned from his father was that his father always spoke last. See, he allowed every single other person to speak before him. And so every single day we hear, on a daily thing, we say that we need to listen better. Nelson Mandela's philosophy then was not that you need to listen better, it's that you need to speak last. You see, so many times we find ourselves in these positions where we're wanting to cure everybody's problems. So many times we listen and we want to respond immediately. The beauty of speaking last is that you get to hear everybody's viewpoint as well as from where they are speaking. So many times we react so quickly to people. So many times people upset us. And then we start thinking, oh, you're such an idiot. Or we react with anger or whatever it is. But never do we sit and just try to think it from what perspective they are speaking from. Some of the people that we find being the hardest and most hectic people, I know that there's people in this church that thankfully I've gotten to know. People that people look at and they say, wow, you're quite a rude guy. Until you actually realize their past. You can see that they've got so many defense mechanisms up that instead of being soft and letting people walk over them, they've got this facade of being hard. You see, sometimes we need to try to understand from where people come. And that is how we will start affecting this world for Christ. We will start trying to, as soon as we understand where people come from, we are able then to know where they are at and how far we need to bring them to Christ. Navy SEALs, one of the most elite fighting task force or whatever you want to call them in the world. The most difficult mentally and physical challenge is to get into them. And so you find that people that go there, they get broken. You know, the success rate, I don't know what the success rate is, but it's not very high. People think that they can get into it, but it's extremely difficult. And so a question was then once asked to one of the leaders, I don't know what you call a leader in the SEALs, but let's call him the Mama SEAL or Dad SEAL, whatever it is. And he said, and a person asked him, he says, what does it take to become a Navy SEAL? And he says, I cannot tell you what it takes to become a Navy SEAL, but I can tell you who does not make it to become a Navy SEAL. He says the person that you always suspect to be the one that can come, the big burly guy, the guy that's been top dog, the number one runner on the athletics track, or the guy that feels that he just needs to be ranked top so that he can delegate everything, the person that is very arrogant, that is the person that does not make it. He said, I can say that hands down. Those are the ones that fall out first. And he says that what I can say is that 9 times out of 10, the most scrawny, unexpecting person is the one that makes it. The scrawny person that you would push aside, say, you're not going to make it. Those are the ones that make it. It's those ones that are sitting there that are shivering in absolute fear when they think of trying to face on another task force, where they've got bullets flying to them, that they're shivering in their boots, and the ones that almost get to the point of not being able to function, those are the ones that stay as a Navy SEAL. Because those are the ones that somehow, whatever they've got in them, they can dig far deeper than those that are arrogant. Those that are again, maybe they've gone through a lot of difficult times in their past. Those are the ones that stay. He went on to say that what blew his mind and blows his mind continuously is that very person that is shaking in absolute fear, that is at the point of breaking, yet digs deeper, is still able to look to the left and right of him and help the person next to him. And sometimes I think to myself, how many times do we sit here in church and we're fighting this spiritual war up there, and we like to think that we've got it all under control? How many times do we sit here and we say, oh, but I'm struggling with my own spiritual life? How many of us look to the left and right of us right now and say, I'm going to be there to lift you up as well? How many times do you look at the person right next to you? And I really and truly, who was it? Kristen. Where's Kristen? There, yeah. In your lesson, your Lord's Supper, where you said that many people would die for those that they love. How many people would die for their brother and sister that's here? How many of us are willing to go through sacrifice for the person that's to the left and right of you? And I know that I've mentioned this in countless lessons, but then it should be something that we should be taking note of. You see, it's easy to love those that just love us back. We need to love like Christ loves, unconditionally. We need to start getting into the lives of other people and becoming the soldiers of Christ that Christ needs us to be. There was the 1700s. I don't know how many of you were there at that time. Sorry, the 1800s, not the 1700s. In the 1800s, there was a sickness that went around. It was a disease that took over Europe and infiltrated into America. And there's different names for it and so forth. One was called purple fever, but otherwise known as the Black Death of childbed. Anybody ever heard of that? Yeah, okay. And so you look at that, and what basically happens for those that don't know about it was that women that gave birth would die within 48 hours of childbirth. And this happened continuously. On a daily basis, people were giving birth and dying. And it was disastrous. The Black Death of childbed was an absolute ravage in Europe, and for over a century. There were some hospitals that up to 70% of the women that gave birth in those hospitals would die. 70%. They would die because of this disease. But during this time, it was the absolute renaissance. I mean, everything was about science and innovation. And so the doctors and scientists were the man of the day. And so they just thought, okay, well, here's this issue that we've got. And so they're going to make sure that they study this and understand it, and they're going to cure it. And so the doctors and scientists, what you would find is that they would spend day and night trying to understand it. So what they did was, you find that in the mornings, they would do the autopsies on these women, trying to find out what it was that killed them. And then what they would then do is that in the afternoon, they would go and deliver babies. And so then it wasn't up probably about the mid 1800s, where Oliver Wendell Holmes, must be connected to the Walden Holmes, also bright. Oliver Wendell Holmes said that it was simple. If they're doing autopsies in the morning, delivering babies at night, it must have something to do with that. And so he says, you know what, he found it out, and he says it's simple. The doctors were not washing their hands. The same hands that they were busy doing autopsies on with a woman that died from the disease were delivering babies, and 48 hours later they lost the lady. And so something as simple as a doctor not washing his hands was the cause of a disease that ravaged Europe for over a century. And so this makes me think a little bit more. It makes me think of the life that we are living at the moment. So many times we come to church, or we get exposed to Christian living, but for some reason we don't cleanse our hearts. we don't actually affect change in our lives. We come here, we take Lord's Supper, where it says that you need to reflect on what Christ has done for us. And we don't actually affect change in our lives. It's the same thing as the doctors. You see, we come in here and we think we've got life sussed out completely. Until Christ puts you in his hands and you realize that it's something as simple as washing your hands, we will forever be in the same position and ineffective in the world that we live. If I think about it, these doctors could have saved so many lives, but it was because they did not go back to the elementary things that were taught to them, like tradition. Tradition, like washing your hands after dealing with blood. The Bible speaks of it. The Bible speaks of it, and they didn't look at that. How many times we read in the Bible where it says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind? Who of us take time to actually try to renew your mind? Or is life and your mind just an ongoing development by yourself, where you're developing and advancing every day? But we forget about the very elementary truth of God's word. You see, Christ did something for us. He died for us. He died for you and for me and every single person out there. This morning while I was driving here, I was thinking about fishing for some reason. Don't like fishing. But have you ever thought of potentially throwing 200 hooks in the ocean, baiting it up, and not catching anything? What would your feeling be? Distraught, I can imagine. Disappointed. Now, if we think of ourselves, fishers of men, right here, what we're probably 150 sitting here, 150 hooks that go out into this world every single week, baited with the very thing that can draw people to Christ. Baited with the love of Christ. Baited with the things that can comfort people in difficult times. When was the last time you caught something? When was the last time you brought somebody to Christ? It's scary to think that a church and Christianity seems to have lost its effectiveness to reach the souls of people. And they need it. We need to start focusing out. Stop focusing in. Stop walking in here thinking that you know how your life needs to be. We need to give back to God. I love the youth because they always are so willing to help. The youth, or these three fine, young, good-looking gentlemen, are going to hand out some papers to you right now. Please. Pretty please. Thank you very much. Please make sure that you get a pen and a piece of paper. And I'm going to ask the servers to please come forward that served this morning. Those that were at the Lord's table, if you can please come forward once again. If I look at giving is one of those things that we sometimes do either out of desire or not desire. Sometimes we give out of the goodness of our hearts, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we love and we don't, and so forth. But one thing that you committed when you gave your life to Christ was that you are going to be a soldier for Him. That you are going to be committed to Him 100% of the time. That you are going to ensure that you love those next to you. That you are going to be the light of the world. That you are going to be the salt of the earth. When last have you allowed your soul to be transformed to be that? You know what? Let's be fair. Giving money can be the easiest thing for many people. Because what you give is not really going to dent your pocket that much. Do you remember the day that you gave your life to the Lord? Do you remember the day that you committed to Him 100% that you were going to be His disciple and servant? And so this morning, it's your choice. Either put your name on there to give your life to God again. And let's put it in the plate. When we partake of the Lord's Supper, we are remembering His death. We're reflecting on the life that we live. And so for those that have got pens and papers, put your name on the plate. And we are going to give back yourself to God. It means that in this week, whatever you come into contact with, you are going to be the salt and light of this world. You know what, yesterday when I gave to that, when you give that jungle gym to that child and you see that happy face, it makes you want to do more. And so you know what it's going to be? If I need to stand here week in and week out, and many more with me, we say that we need to start committing more to God, giving our lives to God, being more committed to Him, we need to do it. If I need to come to you and hold your hand and pull you to give back to God, I will do it. So many of us don't do that anymore because we're so inwardly focused. Giving back to God and our lives is what we need to do. Maybe you today are at the point where you feel like you can't give because you are down in the dumps. I'm here to say that I will give you my number to phone me. I will take you out for coffee. Free coffee. That's a good... Oprah did this. It worked. Free coffee. I will take you out for coffee. And we will talk. And if I need to go on my knees to beg you to live how Christ wants you to do it, I will. Let's start giving back to God. Will the service please collect? Thank you very much. Let us stand as we sing our final song.